Right. So there was a question which was asked. I give it as a not a master shah. I guess it was master shahayu, because technically I'm sure it happens continuously. Basically, was in the master Eruv gave a drushim bismedish, right? And he said that basically they're raising money for bismedish, whatever they're raising money, and so you had somebody that's a few shirim or whatever it is, and one of them decided that he's going to give whatever it is that we're raising for. And Lamasa, he had a few reasons why he decided to do it. One is because he was moved. It was a good drusha. Okay, fine. Other thing is Lamasa, he wanted the plaque. Zweite, they wanted the COVID. Third thing is that his wife wanted to have a nishmas, any whatever appearance. He anyways had masa sadoka echili. In other words, basically which is a general thing, which is that there's many motives towards the act. All right, do pushing. Now, Pashas, according to what we have been doing from technically the 4th, but technically from the 7th until the 9th, till last week, we're saying that just because somebody you do a masa, doesn't automatically mean that it is under some action, meaning it doesn't, or the action itself, let's put it that way, does not prescribe what is being done. And if that's the case, we're saying that just because a person, he gave the money to this Bismedish to build whatever it is he wanted to build, doesn't mean that he actually formed or formulated anything. That's pashas what one could take out from what we're saying until now. But Lamasa, what he's asking is, HaChassidus, you had, let's say, 2 people in this Bismedish. One person gave the money, we just discussed, right, for whatever the many multitude of motives. Other person didn't give. Although time again, he was a miser, he was a Kant, and he didn't give money. So one person actually took out money, the other person did not take out money. So then why can't we simply say, the objective fact is that he took money from his nechusim, he took money from his pocket and gave it to the Bismedish. That is an objective fact. However you want to translate it, whatever you want to say it, whatever it does, it go under any header of any single thing. Self is he took out money, the other person did not take out money. He was moved by the roof thing, the other person was not moved. Whatever the other motives, or even if it wasn't even, let's say he wasn't even moved from the roof. Lamasa, he took out money. So he got habituated, or he's being habituated to take out money and give to the other person. Mashak and the other person, the miser, is not being habituated. So why is that not enough to say that he is being habituated for a particular action? Now, to say that just because you took out money, b'mayla, you're being habituated for something, to giving out money, is a very weak claim in of itself, because you can say that a gambler takes out money also. You can say because a gambler who wants to win, right? Everybody has a motive why they're giving out money, right? A person that if he always gives too much because on somebody else is also giving out for, because he feels he has to get money. I mean, no one. We'll see later. It's faked. The difference between an animal and a person is that a person always acts. There's always an emotive. According to Aristotle, at least the person always has an emotive thing which makes him do an act, not just simply he sees and he does it without thinking, right? That's basically if you do something without thinking, it's a bang, right? Right? A person by definition has the faculty that he could reason, and he could reason, and he has the emotion which moves him towards it. All right, let's get too much ahead of ourselves. The end of the day here, Sofkasov is just because a person took money out of his pocket to give doesn't mean anything, because you have somebody enjoys paying the bill, he always the pressure he has to pay his bills, and he pays. He takes out the money of his pocket always to pay his bill on time. You can say that this person is habituated to give because he gives out money, so now he's habituated to give always. Right? So the act of taking money out of your pocket to give somebody that's not really a tan. That's not saying that now he's being habituated to do good things. Right? They have a gambler. You have people that just. He's absent-minded, always takes the money, right? Okay, that's the Nishkan Masa. But I think the point that I'm trying to say is simple enough. Now, the fact that there could be a wrong motive, could still habituate, could still change the person. This is often the Gemara. Chazal, by definition, you're doing it for the wrong motive. That's Mishlei Lishma, and Bu Lishma, you're going to get to Lishma. So obviously, the fact is that that's not up for grabs. Chazal tell us, and that's what we're dealing with. The fact that there could be a wrong motive to the point which will not habituate the person correctly is Ochta Chazal. right? There is a certain case of There's a certain type of wrong motive, which is, now again, we have not discussed it, we haven't really delved into it, and we're not getting into that right now. These are, I think, miscondition, these are axioms, these are we're accepting. Right, so the question, what exactly is the claim? Because that one person, Lamasa, took out money, the other person did not take out money, and therefore the one taking out money is being habituated, we need to sort of sharpen it. That's not just like he took out money. He took out money to a good cause, right? Now he gave money to tzedakah. Now, even though we said in the previous seminar, the 9th seminar, that there's no such thing automatically, that an action automatically incorporated underneath this concept of tzedakah. Now, the tzedakah is not self-explanatory of itself, right? Which is why does not necessarily just because he gave money to that it was counted as tzedakah. Lamasa, he gave it to a good cause. Objectively, the Besmedish has no money, and they're able to build whatever they needed to build. So in that case, to reconstruct the question over here is, one person took out money and he gave it to the right cause, gave it to a good cause, not the right cause. The miser didn't take out money and didn't give it to the right cause. So why can't we say, the objective good end, which happened over here, that is that the Besmedish right now has the money to build or whatever it is they want to do with it, happened, and this person became habituated to do something good. That is a reconstruction, or I believe, what the yisoid of the question over here is. Now, in truth, this is similar to in the 7th seminar, which we discussed, we called the lecturer. He gave the whole thing that the shmaza didn't the masa, whatever that means. So it's a similar concept, but it takes care of the issue which you brought up then, or at least superficially. Why? Because Lamasa, what we have been trying to establish, as I said from the past 3 seminars, that there's no such thing as saying there's a self-explanatory masa. There is no such thing as when I do something, it is just when the act of doing it itself shows what it is. Everything, it depends, right? Playing chess, a checkmate is not an actual move in the board. It is in the thing of chess, there's a concept of chessmate, right? Remember from, I think it was last week, we spoke about it 2 weeks ago, whatever it is. That they're saying basically the chessmate is, you can't learn chessmate by just watching somebody play a game, right? Because all you're seeing is the person move the thing and the person's put whatever, it could be technically any single piece, right? He moved the piece and shooting checkmate. And everybody left. So they shook hands, but if it was a real competition, right? And we left. So did I learn what checkmate is? Of course not, because I have no idea what just happened. All I know is that before you finish a game, even that's also not true. I can have stalemate also if you finish the game. Yeah, you could also say he's not even checkmate. Before checkmate, you give up. Whatever I've got the word for it, right? Another you forfeit the game because you give up, right? Because you said that you see ready where it's going. The master point here is you can't learn what checkmate is just by watching, observing a game, right? You have to you have to understand the basic, the concept, the rules of chess, the concept of chess at least, and then that's it, right? They're saying that a speech does not necessarily mean noise does not constitute speech. A parrot which makes noise does not mean that it's speaking, right? All these things are things which are dependent on its context, dependent on. Basically, this is what we have been using Wittgenstein for, and by moving this to Yahadus, moving this as tzedakah, also such thing as giving money that it's tzedakah, right? So in other words, therefore, no such thing as saying a mitzvah automatically is a masa mitzvah, which then goes and can habituate this person, right? That was really what the lecturer's position was. To do it, the kavuna is a din of the masa, basically is doing a masa mitzvah, and that automatically habituates. But we're saying there's no such thing as doing a masa mitzvah. Masa mitzvah is dependent on its context, and I don't want to make a chazur of the last Rishirim. But here, the question could be formulated, even if we don't want to say that no problem, there was not master sukkah. We don't get into sukkah and ishtukkah. Mitzias is there was an objective good act which happened over here. So this besmedish right now, even just watching, a person watches, sees, and now the besmedish can build because of the money that he got. So let's leave the masa mitzvah chaylik is yogat on the mitzvah, nishan on the mitzvah. That's not relevant. The mitzias is there has been an objective good act, a good end happened. That is that now the besmedish has money to build, and that should habituate.
I think it's more than that. I think it's deeper than that. I mean, it says not only because the Spanish got the money, it's also the person, even if he wanted a bride, he wanted to give tzedukah as a bride. So meaning that he wanted to do the act of tzedukah.
The bride part in this conversation.
Yeah, right.
Well, I actually forgot about that, to be honest with you.
Because that is actually an important part of it, because it's a contradictory intent in the same action. So on one hand, you say if the intent enforces, so he's now enforced to do bribery, or is he enforced to do tzedakah? Because he's doing one act.
What do you mean the intent is enforced or enforced?
If the intent has influence, in other words, the intent gets connected to the
When you say intent, you mean motive?
Motive.
Fine. Let's use motive, not just. Like, I want to use the same terms because it could mean different things. All
So
right.
if the motive sort of reflects back on him, and that is some part of this, what it does to him internally, you can do one action, and by putting together all different reasons.
I'm asking. The reason why I agree with this, and I don't think we have to get into things, is because I'm going to grant you for this seminar, the second is that I'm going to give you many things that we'll take for granted. We'll get to that it was an objective good. That it really was an objective good thing. We'll give that motive doesn't make a difference even. Doesn't make a difference. Contradictory motives, non-motive, I don't care. Any motive, even if it was a bad motive. I'm not getting it. That's a separate discussion. We'll have to, I think it's, whatever. At this point, not in point saying which seminar to be because everything is not really working out exactly as I'm intending to, but whatever it is, make sure we'll get to that. It's a very important thing, the master motive, right? That's basically the whole concept that we know that there could be contradictory motives and it still works. The constantly is some the question is, does contradictory, right? Or is it how we gave a concept of wrong in the shemaim, whatever it is, right? Meaning of fear as opposed to the kabbalah soil side. Again, no problem. Even they say that he had many different motives and it doesn't make a difference. That does not affect the thing. And no problem granting it for the seminar. And no problem granting that it was tzedukah, mamash, that it even was masa tzedukah, even though, again, that's the thing. And that it was an objective good also. I say objective good means that literally Tataka was a good objection. Not objection, that it was objectively good. No problem granting it. So I don't think we really have to discuss that right now because the whole thing is going on the hanuchis that it is. The question over here then is, granting all these, is the simple fact that the person did this with all these things, did it still habituate it? Is it habituating him correctly? That is really the question.
Yeah.
Right? So now we'll grant all these things. Now, let's make our thing even one step stronger. It has to be this concept of motives to a certain extent has to work. Otherwise, the concept of habituation makes no sense. Why? Because by definition, the action has to exceed the motive, at least initially. What I mean to say by that is, if you're saying that, if what it could sound like I was trying to say, that it has to be the correct motive, b'shas masa, then it's not shaykh habituation. Menuchah. If I'm doing it correctly, then I don't need habituation. If I'm not doing it correctly, and I'm saying habituation doesn't work, if not the motive is wrong, right, then it's not shaykh habituation. So by definition, the missing habituation must be that it's being done wrongly, right?
Not 100% right.
Right. There's something here. The question here is, so that the two questions here. One, the question is the actual motive concept, which is we're circling around for today, because this is not, I don't want to get into this right now, that's a whole separate thing. And we could grant that a motive does make a difference in this sense. What is in the guide in the last over here is, if the objective end automatically makes it that the action is good, or helps her habituation. In other words, do we say that just because the Mitzvah says objectively something good happened, and remember, I don't care, the motive is something, the motive does not affect this, whatever it is, meaning the motive thing is.
We're not talking about that.
Right. No, and we'll say that the motive, but not that we're not talking about, we'll say that the Pamula, the motive makes no difference. Right? The Pasha will be any single thing, from Kova thing, with Thesis thing, every single thing is fine, no matter how you did it, I don't care. Motive does not affect habituation, a wrong habituation, doesn't make a wrong habituation. Does that mean that just because something good happened in the end, that my action, which was being habituated, right? The act of giving over here. I'm giving money. So what's being habituated? I'm going to give money. Is that being habituated correctly? That is the question over here. Right? And that is what I want to say that whatever, that's on the discussion. Right? Now, because the question here is phrased slightly differently, which action is being habituated? So we already said it's not the general concept of giving money, because in that case, it's every single time you give money, you're saying you should be habituated giving money, right? That's the Levapusha, doesn't it? A gambler, you're saying not habituated to giving money. We're not saying the person pays his bills is being habituated to give money, right? That's a very, very thin concept of some general giving, that when I give it, I'm being habituated. No, that we're not saying. So the shal over here is whether it's giving the habituation of being a participant in an objective good, right, which is what the case that we're discussing now, or has to be an action which is rightly and correctly ordered, even if the actual motive is wrong, but the action itself has to be rightly ordered. That is the question. That is a key point which we have to discuss today. Now, I just want to clarify that why this is not called basically a chazura, meaning as in a chazura, not a repetition. Basically, as we're going back, meaning we're falling back. Again, the right word. A mischoizer to an old thought, to an old understanding. What's the correct word for it? Retraction. Like, so why is not a retraction to what we have been? I mean, basically, Wittgenstein is basically the way we spend the past 3 seminars, that there is no such thing as a neutral action, right? Every single action needs to have an answer. So let me say is here, why doesn't that not take care of this issue? Again, you gave the money, so that itself should tell me, is giving the money considered tzedukah, not giving tzedukah? The point of it here is really very simple. Wittgenstein is telling me is there's no such thing as a neutral action. That is correct. And we're going to, for sake of argument, we're going to say that right now that this is takamasa tzedukah. We're going to say that. Again, we don't have to, because the question here is, just to try to make sure that we're clear on what the question over here is, there's different levels that we're discussing right now. Wittgenstein is discussing, what we have been dealing with till now is what makes an action considered part of, considered this action, that is the context, that is the rule, that is the social form, whatever it is, how we understand what action is. Right? As somebody says, tzedukah is not charity, right? Because tzedukah is, we're talking about halachic, it's giving money under a halachic subscription rubric. Charity is giving under a secular thing. Now, it does not mean that you can be doing both the same thing, right? It could be considered charity, and therefore it's a tax deduction. It's tzedukah that can give mas for them, but it's not the same thing, right? Because it's a tax deduction, that doesn't necessarily mean you can give mas either, right? They're two separate things. One is Torah language, and one is charity, is the secular language. And you could call tzedukah charity if you want, but it depends. Right? It's not the translation. It's not the word. Someone says tzadik dal kifai, or if it's charity, it's char whatever ity, and it's not dependent on the language. It's dependent on which context, on which grammar it is under, right? That is what Wittgenstein has been saying. Right now we're discussing a whole different question. The question over here is the action itself, is the action a good action? It's a question of, I feel that once we understand that a action has a grammar which puts it, situates it, and calls what it is this ultimately the correct action to do? And it's a whole separate discussion. Aristotle, which we're going to be dealing with mostly today, is, because, he's way before Wittgenstein, and this whole concept, which is a different point, again, we are going to get back to it, because the Masse, once we accept a Wittgensteinian understanding of action and grammar over here, remember, I think last week, grammar doesn't mean speech. It means action also. Grammar is simply, we're calling the rules of action, human action in general. Once we accept such a thing, that means to say is that there's no such thing which is neutral. Right? For Aristotle, flourishing, the best human good, whatever, right? Flourishing itself is context dependent. Good is context dependent. What's considered human is context dependent. Every single thing, which is why it takes the whole concept of the ethics, and it calls it into question. And again, this is going to be later, which I'm going to get to it, but not now. I'm saying, but that's like a third step. Right now, Wittgenstein has, what we've been dealing with until now is what makes an action under the rubric of its intelligible as a certain action, what it is. The question we're dealing with now over here is what makes an action, the correct action, a good action. Even once we understand what the person is trying to do, or how he's understanding it, is this a correct action? Now, how do we know what the correct action is? Two different questions. We're dealing right now with the second question, which is basically an Aristotelian. We're going to be using Aristotle. Technically everybody has to, that's a question which everybody has to ask, but right. Now, skip. So the shaladu is, anything you need to read, anything already. There's going to be a bit of an issue with reading this time, because Aristotle is very dense and very long. And to explain every single line is achla moised, because there's no real reason to explain every single line. So we're going to do a lot of, till now, whenever we're reading, try to touch every single word, we're going to be skipping things, even if I'll say it, because it's really just going to take too long. We're really supposed to have 10 pieces I wanted to read, as it was going to be way too long. So now I'm going to do, I think, 4 or 5 pieces. It's probably still going to be too long. And I've always found that takes us, we have to really finish a certain thing. So that's Either way, so let's say right now. So right now, again, what we're not going to be discussing over here is we're not proving Aristotelian categories. We're taking everything for granted. Let's say for instance, we're going to be using the Shabbos case as a recurring theme over here. So we're going to take for granted that this is what we discussed seminar 8, which was not recorded. But the end of the day here is that Shabbos, that the objective point, objective good, the telos of Shabbos is Menuchah, right? We'll grant that the Shabbos it's the two aspects of it. We'll have to sort of make a small chazura because we didn't have a seminar 8. The Maaseh, there's one other point, the concept of a good. There's two good. We're going to be using good now on two different levels, and it's very important to keep it separate. First, I'm saying is that we can't say that the action was an objective good action, right? We're saying is that gave the Smedish Lamasa has no money, therefore it's objectively good, right? We mean to say so that is on the outcome, on the tetzua. Independent, obviously the person had to give it, but we're not discussing the person did a good action, right? And then we're saying the person did a good action. Two separate questions. A person could do an action which is not necessarily good, but a good outcome comes out of it, right? So we're saying that objectively good, referring to the outcome, that is, we're granting that it is objectively good, that the Besmendish right now has money to go build whatever they wanted to build. So the action was good. The question is, was the person's, the one that gave the money, did he do an objectively good action? So although we're using objectively good in two different things, two different spheres. One is the end result, and that's not the discussion, that we're saying we're granting that it is objectively good. The other question, the other objectively good that we're using is the person, the one that did it, and that is a question, did he do an objectively good action? Right? Just we don't want to keep that straight because we're going to keep the two different levels. We're going to continue to return back to that. Okay, so now I think we should read Aristotle 2:4. It's actually okay. So it's the Nicomachean Ethics. 2:4 should be the first one, no? Yeah. So this is actually from the easiest paragraphs to read. Either way, but someone may raise a question. So he's speaking about habituation right here. Someone may raise a question about how we can say to become just, people need to do what is just, and to do what is moderate in order to become moderate. Right? So in other words, you saw it is we start with habituation. Habituation means you do something and then you're becoming whatever you're doing. So to become just, you have to do something that's just, and to become a moderate, which is the golden mean, right, which is the middle path, you have to do something which is moderate. Right? So Shvilei here is, for Aristotle, the paradox. For if they are doing what is just and moderate, by definition, right, they're doing it just as moderate, right? In that case, what was the place doing just moderate? They are already just and moderate, by definition, right? You're saying over here is that you're doing just, you have to become just and moderate, you have to do just and moderate, some actions just and moderate, so but that means then you're doing already just and moderate actions. So what does that mean? You're becoming just and moderate. You are already doing just and moderate. In the same way in which people are behaving literally or grammarly, all the translations have it, and musically, they're already expert at reading and writing music, right? If somebody is playing the violin, then obviously he's an expert in playing violin, or at least he knows how to play the violin, right? He is a musician. Or does this fail to hold the fact even for skills? Okay, we could say the Lamasa that he does. Okay, whatever. One could do something illiterate. So here's the aside. One could do something illiterate both by chance and at someone else's prompting. Right? He could do something which is, he could do a literate thing by chance and something else's prompting. However, one will only count as literate then if one both does something illiterate and does it in the way a literate person does it. And this is a matter of doing it in accordance with one's own expert knowledge of letters. So if pink but truthful, you manage to go read, right? So now, you see about kids or children, right? They're learning words, and they're spelling it out in their head and say sometimes they're correct and sometimes they're wrong. We call them literate. No, they're not literate because as now they don't have the knowledge for it. They're learning how to. So even if they by mistake, it is by definition a mistake. They do read it correctly. Does not mean they're literate, even though they did something which is literate. Because someone that's literate that knows how to read. Right? Neither do the case of the skills and that of excellence and that of the excellences resemble each other. The skill excellence is referring to the moral virtues. The things that come about through the agency of skills contain in themselves the mark of their being done well. Right, so that is enough. In turn, let's paraphrase this first outside. Basically, as he's saying is, if somebody made a craft, a kaila, let's say, right? The fact the kaila itself, which is outside now, which is built, shows the skill of the craftsman, and therefore, Masha'ankan is saying that by moral virtues, that's precisely what you even doing a moral virtuous act does not show if the person is virtuous or not. That's what he's going to bring out of here. Again, neither do the case of the skills and that of the excellences resemble each other. They're not exactly alike. The skills is referring to technique meaning actual skills of physical whatever technical skills. Masha'ankan the excellences he's referring to moral virtues. The things that come about through the agency of skills contain in themselves the mark of their being done well, so that it is enough if they turn out a certain way. He built the kaila. Whereas the things that come about in accordance with the excellences count as done justly or moderately, not merely because they themselves are of a certain kind, but also because of facts about the agent doing them. So just moderately, not merely because they themselves are of a certain kind, but also because of the facts about the agents doing them first. If he does them knowingly, right? Secondly, if he decides to do them and decides to do them for themselves, and thirdly, if he does them from a firm and unchangeable disposition. So, basically, he's going to be a bit a polemic against Plato. Basically, he's saying, right? He's saying here is that by doing a skill, by actually building a kaili, the fact he built a kaili, that is ready to consider the skill. That's ready means a skilled person, and he's doing it technically correctly. Just the fact you did a virtuous action does not. We would not consider you a virtuous person. Just the fact you did a virtuous action. Only the three things, which are there, and the first one is the knowledge, right? The second, meaning he does. First, he does the knowing. Second, if he decides to do them, it was a decision. Right, for themselves, meaning not for a different reason, and not for the wrong motive. And thirdly, if he does it from a firm and unchanging disposition, that means the point over here is he became a virtuous person. Now, when there's a matter of having skills, these conditions are not relevant except for knowledge itself. Skill and that, right? That's saying the difference between the first thing, right? By as far as skill is, makes a difference why you're doing it, the motive, or the end of the day here is are you doing it willingly or forced. The end of the day here is the end result is you have a finished kaili, you have a finished house, whatever it is. So we say you're a skilled worker who made that house. By virtues, but when it comes to having the excellences, having excellences, knowledge makes no difference or a small one. I'll try to explain in a second what it means. Whereas the force of the other conditions is not small but counts for everything. In other words, it has to be done for the correct reason, the right thing, knowingly, and he has to done it from his disposition. That's what it means to be a virtuous person. And as these are results from the repeated performances of just and moderate actions. Basically, saying over here is Plato or Halton that a person to make a person virtuous, you need to have knowledge. That's it. Once you know, you don't know. Again, it's in many of the dialogues you have. Socrates always saying there is a person that knows. A person does not knowingly do something which is wrong. If he's doing it wrong, it means he must think that this is the right thing to do. That is, again, obviously, in a nutshell, it's a little bit deeper than that, but whatever it is. So Aristotle strongly disagrees with that, and the knowledge itself is not at all makes a person virtuous. Our knowledge is not at all what is enough for a person to think. Say in the end of this paragraph also is going to go back to the armchair philosophers. That's not a virtuous person at all, which is why he says that it makes no difference or a small one, the knowledge, what thing. About that you have to know, whatever. It's more a polemic against Plato. So what Epieikeia is being done. The action is being done the right purposes, the right reason, and in the right way, and is being done as the disposition. I mean, the person was habituated to become such a person that does this. Right? That is what a virtuous person is. But when it comes to having excellences, knowledge makes no difference, a small one, whereas the force of the other conditions, right, the other two, which just spoke at, is not small, but counts for everything. And it is these that results from the repeated, and it is these two things, especially the third one, which is basically it's becoming a disposition should be to do this person, that there's such thing, this that results from repeated performances of just and moderate actions. So things done are called just and moderate whenever they so now, okay. So remember, we had the question, the paradox. How's it possible that a person how's it possible to say, but listen, not possible. Where does habituation come to the picture? The thesis over here is, he's saying a person becomes habituated if he does just and moderate actions. Now, if he's doing just and moderate actions, then he is a just and moderate person. So why would he need habituation? And if he's not doing just and moderate action, how does habituation work? That is the question that Aristotle started out with. Aristotle goes, look, it's very simple. Let's dissect this. What exactly does it mean to be just and moderate person? There are three actions. In order to do an action, there are three things. We need to have the knowledge. We need to have that you're doing an action doing the actual action, and your disposition is to do this action. Those are the three things. Now, when it comes to skills, if they're a skilled person to build a house, whatever it is, I don't care about the other two, the purpose, how he did it, what he did it. Was he forced to do it? Is he a person that likes to build the guy mechashtun? I look at the end result. You built a house, and tell me you are a skilled person. Knowledge is the only thing which is in the guy. When it comes to motive, knowledge plays a lot less of a role, but isn't the most important role when it comes to not motive. It comes to ethics, and when it comes to ethical actions. Morals is is doing correct actions. The actions have to be correct, right? Because if you are a person that's doing the wrong thing, it's really you can do wrong actions and be a person that disposition is to do right actions, right? Now, how do we know what the right actions is? This is precisely what we're going to have to dissect today, right? But ultimately, definitely, it's to be a moral person means you're doing the right actions, and your disposition, and then the ultimate, what habituation does, and makes you the person that has a disposition of doing only these right actions. So, habituation is through doing correct actions. What it does, it makes you a person whose disposition is to do the correct actions. That's what it's should go over here. So it is appropriate to say that the just person comes about from doing what is just, and the moderate person from doing what is moderate. The second thing, which is Nagaya. Whereas from not doing those things, no one will have excellence in the future either. Now he goes back to polemic of Plato. We'll just finish it, why not? It's easy. But most people fail to do these things, and by taking refuge in talk, and they think that they are philosophizing, and they will become excellent this way. So behaving rather like sick people, when they listen carefully to the doctors, when they fail to do anything of what is prescribed to them, for them, they study more philosophy, they study whatever ethics, and look, that's going to make me an ethical person. It's like listening to a doctor telling you what you have to go do to be good, and you're not doing anything. It's like watching somebody do exercise and saying that I'm becoming a better person by learning how to do exercise, right? Well, just as the latter for their part won't be good in bodily conditions, if they look after themselves like that, neither will the former have the souls in good condition if they philosophize like that. Basically, what does Aristotle say? That the paradox is Gamfit. Why is it Gamfit? Because what was the question? How is it possible to do good, virtuous actions if you're not a virtuous person? And if you're doing, habituation has no place. The answer is very simple. Habituation is that you have three things, actions. You have knowledge, you have knowledge, you have doing the actions, and then you have becoming the person whose disposition is to do these actions correctly. Now, so knowledge, just obviously you have to learn it, but knowledge does make you a virtuous person. Knowing what ethics is, in theory, knowing theoretical thing is not making you a virtuous person. So what is it? The action itself. If actions are making a good person, by definition, then by just you doing the actions, you are a just person. No, the just person saying here has all three things, or two things at the minimum, right? He's doing virtuous actions, and his disposition, his disposition is to do virtuous actions. Now, so therefore, it is between the second and third thing which habituation comes into the picture. Habituation is by doing virtuous actions, you're going to then become a person whose disposition is to do virtuous actions. However, the prerequisite is that the actions that you're doing have to be virtuous, right? Now, motives. Aristotle's alliance is a status. I didn't put it because we're going to get into it. There's a state exactly where some places he says it has to be done for the right intention also. Certainly is right intention. Doesn't make a difference. Aristotle says it's Nish Chazal. It's a separate discussion. Not in the guy. We're not getting into the motives. We granted it for the sake of the argument, so therefore we're not going to get into exactly what motives is. So for the sake of this, but one thing is clear. Aristotle says that we have to be correct actions, which means what is a correct action? I don't know if it makes any sense to read it inside. Basically, is doing it for the right reason, the right person, the right time, and whatever, at the right moment. That is technically what doing correct actions is, right? So now, habituation is not circular because habituation is precisely at the separation between doing the virtuous act and becoming a person that is his disposition is to do the virtuous acts.
Why is that important that it should be his disposition? If he just does it on a continuous basis,
so
why is it necessary that it becomes called virtuous?
Because the definition of a virtuous person is one that his disposition is to do.
Why is it important to be a virtuous person? What's important?
Why is it important to be a virtuous person? Why is it important for that?
No, in other words, the being a virtuous person just to be one is not. What's the point in that?
Well, there is no such thing. That's exactly that. That is knowledge.
Okay, so
that is knowledge. That is Aristotle's polemicizing against.
If you keep doing something,
right,
and you just keep doing it, you do it every time. Isn't that exactly what you would call a virtuous person?
In Shvilei would say otherwise. They don't say that has no.
Well, I mean, technically, he's really coming from Sefer HaMidas. I'm connected. But again, I'm not. I'm not sure.
With a question. It says, if you're already doing it, you already are. I don't understand how he's answering that, because
right.
If you continue doing it, then you already are without any whether you're disposition to do it. You have to fight every time. Maybe every time it's like a whole new mahla. You never reach the point where this is becoming you. It's never you.
But you're still doing it.
You're still doing it.
Right. So it was the difference between having something, being something, and doing something. Is there a difference between doing and being?
Yeah, there is a difference, but the question is there really a difference? I'm doing it.
Practically?
You're doing it. Yeah, practically.
So
where else does it matter? I mean,
I don't know how much to invoke. Let's say the Tani, for instance, right? This is the Rusha, right? This is the Rusha and Tzadik. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. Let's say push it, and then let me rephrase. Tell me this: what you're asking. Make sure I understand what you're saying. Basically, what you're asking is this way: who said that a virtuous person is one whose disposition is to only do the correct things? It could be that a person who be'etzem wants to do wrong things. Does he ever do the wrong things? No, he never does wrong things. Right? No, that is the Rusha, the Tzaddik. Want, we said want. The want. Okay, whatever. Let's not use the Tanya as trying to say it, because that's a whole separate thing, right? So let's go simple thing. So he's saying it here. Let's for a second. He does not do bad things, right? But he wants to do good things. I mean, he wants to do bad things, but he only does good things. That is a virtuous person, right? So what does he have? Was he a koine in the middle of virtue?
It doesn't matter.
It's two different. The question I'm not asking about matter. I'm asking, was he koine in the middle of virtue? The question I'm not asking. Hold on. I'm not asking if practically there's a difference. I'm asking technically. Let's say just a second. Is this considered that does he have a kinyan in that middle or not? When we say somebody has something, doesn't mean that when we say somebody is a virtuous person, right? What do we mean? The question here is not, I'm not asking if there's a practical difference. That's like saying, is there a practical difference between a baini and a tzaddik? If no one ever does, if they don't ever do navaide, that once you wait the navaide, it can never be a baini, whatever it is, right? Is there a practical difference? Well, yes, it needs to be a very big practical difference. But I don't even want to get into that part right now, because right now we're saying maybe what is heist, what is called, what is the mean to be a virtuous person? That is a question. The question here is not practically there's a difference. That's a separate thing we have to discuss. Is there a practical difference? I mean, just without getting such superficially, it's almost impossible to say that someone that actually has a battle every single time is going to end up doing it virtuously. Furthermore, there's always going to be a delay in his actions. I could give a bunch of small, again, it could sound pedantic, but I don't think we have to really get into that discussion right now, because ultimately, the mitzias is, when we say a person is a virtuous person, we mean b'mahosi is a virtuous person. That means when we say a person is wealthy, we mean he actually has the X, whatever the amount of money is, right? Not that he is working towards getting that amount of money, right? Ultimately, even you agree that the person that is still doing, the person that is your type of person could be a person that's doing the right, even though it's always a battle. He is still then working towards becoming that person. Unless you deny this shaykh the missing at all, which I don't think you are.
No, of course. But what I'm saying is that while you're doing it repetitiously, right, even if it's not become you, right, there is really, like, Aristotle is, like, when you look at it from a third perspective and give you a million different reasons for it, like whatever, this connects you to something higher, whatever. But we're talking about from his perspective as just establishing what is a virtuous person. So I don't understand, like, he's asking a question. We want you to behave like you have the golden mean, whatever. You already are, because you're already doing it. So he's saying, no, you got to go a step deeper. Why?
Okay, the way you're phrasing it is actually it's a very good question. That's what we're going to be discussing right now. And just to sort of get slightly ahead of ourselves is because ultimately there's no such. basically what this presupposes is really your question to begin with, meaning the Shalom Akuda. Why? Because that means that we know what the right way is. The battle over here is to do the right thing. And that is really precisely what we were saying. There's no magic thing is give tzedakah. Be a compassionate person. There is no such clear-cut rule. A virtuous person is one that has been trained so much so that he sees it correctly right away. That is the definition of the thing. A tzaddik is somebody, right? Again, I'm very hesitant really using these words before we haven't even scratched the surface of what these words can even mean, right? But I'm saying, but just without being accurate, 100% whatever. A tzaddik is somebody, is an andere Menuchah. A tzaddik is an andere mehis, right? From a person. Well, das Teure, right? We're hoping to count das Teure. Let's again, just for sake of argument, we're saying das Teure there's a certain called a fifth sense. He knows right away what he should be doing, right? That's wherever the sense comes. We're saying that here he has a different understanding, under the blick, right? He sees things differently, right? That is what ultimately a virtuous person is. He can detect right away what the correct thing is. A person who is training to be virtuous, he is doing acts, but precisely is how does he know what the correct act is, and that is where training comes in.
What
So,
does he call someone who, let's say he has a belief in an afterlife, so his whole life he's doing virtuous acts, but he's not doing kindness mitzvah kindness, he's doing kindness mitzvah his afterlife.
So
that in his disposition to be kind, or how would Aristotle classify that person?
So you're asking a question of motive, or you're saying that the motive changes the action?
I thought he's saying if you do enough kindness, you become kind. But if someone does kindness not because he's trying to be kind, he does kindness because he believes he's going to get whatever he's going to get at some point in time. Is that Aristotle's disposition?
That is really the question of motive, right? The question over here is is part of doing the correct action is a correct motive also, right?
Well, it could be a
Because
correct action, but is he ever a virtuous person?
Okay. In other words, what I think you're asking over here is that your question here is that if the person is only doing it for an end goal which is wrong, right? Now, the minute we take away that end goal, he'll stop doing it. Although, unless we say, according to Aristotle, a person then becomes a person who does kind things, so then the goal doesn't make a difference anymore, right? So that really depends if we say the virtuous action which must be done in order to habituate correctly is independent or dependent on virtue, on motives, and which motives. That told me that's what it'll depend, right? Because if we say that motive makes no difference, then it's correct. We're saying the same way over here is that the only time a person is going to give the money is if he gets a plaque, so it means he was habituated to giving money when he gets a plaque, but not to give money, right? That is, but we're still we're parenthesizing that concept of motive. So, I didn't write this down. I didn't put it there. Why? I'm not sure. I thought that would be important, but actually it is very important. So I'll read it from here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, and it's 2:1. Everyone look up afterwards, and it can be connected. You can find the translation online, by the way. It's public domain. Not the one you have over here. This is a different one, but it's a more modern translation. End of the day here is what happens. Okay, I'm going to read. I'm trying to make it very short. For example, people become builders, and whereas required excellence is all right. I'm starting in the middle of a sentence. This is the Nicomachean Ethics, Book 2. It's the first Paidik in Book 2. Whereas required excellences through having first engaged in the activities, as is also the case with various sorts of expert knowledge. For the way we learn the things we should do, knowing how to do them, is by doing them. Right? A habituation by definition is, or anything, learning anything, is by doing the action, right? If you don't do it, then it's a concept of knowledge, right? For example, people become builders by building. How do you learn how to build? By building a house. Right? Just watching videos or reading books, you're not going to learn how to actually build a house. Hands-on experience is important, right? The guitar players become by playing guitar. Becoming a musician by right. So too then, we become just by doing just things. Moderate by doing moderate things. And courageous by doing courageous things. What happens in cities testifies to this. Lawgivers make the citizens good through habituation. And this is what every lawgiver aims at. But now this is an important part, so I just want to actually where I'm reading it. But those who do it badly miss their mark. And this is what makes one constitution different from another. A good one from a bad one. Again, that is, it is from the same things, this is a very important point. Again, it's from the same things and through the same things that every excellence is both produced and destroyed. And similarly, every expertise, for it is from playing the kithara that both the good and the bad kithara players come about. You become a bad musician by playing badly. You become a good musician by playing good. But it is the playing itself which either makes you good or bad. It's not randomly sitting in the armchair which makes you good or bad. It is so too with builders and the rest. You become a good building will result in good builders, bad buildings and bad ones. If we're not like this, there will be no need at all for anyone to teach them. If just the fact you're building a house makes you a good builder, then you don't need a teacher. Just the fact you play the music, sit at my piano, start playing the piano, you don't need a teacher to teach you how to play music. Right? Obviously, that's not how it works. Why? Because by just playing can make you good or bad depending how you're playing it. Building, you can build the house correctly or not correctly. Not only that, if we're not, and it said everyone would just become good builders or a bad one. This then is how it is with excellences too. The same thing as the moral virtues. For it is through acting as we do in our dealings with human beings that some of us becomes just and others unjust. There's not just magic action of doing a moral action which makes you good or bad. There's no such neutral action of giving, let's say, right? No such thing. Same way, there's no such neutral action of building a house. You're either becoming good at building it or you're becoming bad at building it. Same thing with giving. You're either becoming good at giving, or you're giving good, and that's what you're training yourself in, or you're giving bad, and that's what you're training at. But it's the actual giving itself which actually could make it at certain times worse. Right? A person that has started building bad is worse off than a person that never started building, because he has already trained himself to do things badly. Whereas a person that has not even started, he has not trained himself wrong, right? Shabeshek even all, right? Once you make a mistake, it's a lot harder to be choizer. Right? Chazal tells the same thing. So, that means to say is, there's no such thing as a generic behavior, no such thing as generic action. In other words, a neutral action. Habituation, as Aristotle puts it down, which again, obviously I'm not arguing from authority. I'm trying to explain it right. If you don't agree, you don't have to agree with Aristotle, we can have a discussion about it. But I think this is pretty straightforward, and at the point of habituation as such is not it's not a two-step, it's not two-tier. In other words, you learn how to build, and then you could learn how to build a house good. No, the building itself is adegit, adeshach. Either you're building it correctly or you're building it wrong. Moral virtue is the same thing. No such thing as, we'll go this practice, giving, right? Tzedakah. No such thing as giving neutral. I'm learning how to give. I can either, and eventually I could train myself to give good. No, you're either training yourself as you're doing it. The action is either you're training yourself good or you're training yourself bad. There is no such thing as a neutral thing. It's not a two-step. It's not like you're training giving and then we could train also on top of that good or bad. The giving itself is either good or bad. Building a house, there's no such thing as a building neutral. I'm learning how to build. I can either build good or bad. No, you're building either good or you're building either bad.
What makes it good or bad?
Yeah.
That is the question which we're going to deal with right now. Exactly. That is, they said $1 million question. And obviously he has what to say. And that's really the whole point of this seminar. And it's already, I don't know what to do now. Like the cutter, do I have 6.1 over here or not? I have 6.2. All right. If you want to look it up, you'll see in I didn't put it in book 6, Paidik Aleph. I forgot what it's called, a Paidik Aleph, whatever, chapter 1. In book 6, chapter 1 is where he also speaks about, it's a long, that's a whole Arichas in later also, but he literally speaks out actually giving, right? About that, literally 3, and this translation, whatever. The point thing is, Alang Arichas, I didn't want to bring it down. He said literally this concept, it says 2-1, there is a concept of good and bad action itself. But it's very important, it's a duva pusha, and it's a very important point. Remember, no such thing, whenever you habituate, whenever you act, whenever you're learning something by acting, there's no such thing as a neutral action. Then you could also learn it on top of it, good or bad. It's either you're doing good or bad. I think the house is an easier thing to understand, right? You either build a house, you're building a house correctly or wrong, and you're teaching yourself either the wrong way or the right way, right? Now, so therefore, let's go back to Mishnah 7, right? The lecture, we call him the lecture, right? So it said there's an objective good, which is the good end, whatever the telos that we call of every single mitzvah, there's objective good that happens, and then there's the participation in that good, and then there's formation. That is completely incorrect, right? Because yes, even if you want to say grand, there's an objective good. There is ultimately a end goal which is objectively good. Does not mean that the action, the way you're getting towards it, is the good, correct way of doing it. You could be training yourself bad, even if the end result is good. There's not necessarily, so in a house, yes, obviously, building a house, how do you train yourself bad to build a house wrong if that's the thing is? Even that's not the push. You could be doing it the wrong way. You could be measuring wrong and Pinter worked out, right? But again, you taught yourself to do wrong. But in moral virtue, it's a lot simpler, it's easier to understand, right? It's giving tzedakah, right? You could train yourself, you could be doing the end result is good, yet you're giving money to the Spanish, but you're getting also, you're doing it for the wrong reason that's the way everybody will agree. You're doing it because you want to hurt the other besmedish, right? So yeah, you're training yourself to have spite. But I don't.
Here we're going back to motives. Go back to motives.
Right.
And if you can have 3 different motives in the same action, then what is?
You're right.
Talk about motives.
You're right. However, 2 things. First, I'm saying is only giving it for that reason, not mixed motives.
Usually there is more than
I same way with some building. I'm trying to give a stark example, but fine. But anyway, the point over here does not mean that by doing an action you're correct. No problem. I'll grant you that. Right? Let's keep that out. It still does not mean, right? One thing is that just because you're doing an action automatically and the end result is a good result, that the action itself has to be good. Habituation means you're doing the correct action, whatever the correct action is, right? How you know, towards the end goal, which is going to end up being good, right? That much is, The question is, we didn't get back to Tzeduk yet. You're right, we're not holding there yet.
Not only that, but when he says the 3 things, the first thing is you have to know that you're doing it.
We're going back to okay.
Then you have to know the knowledge and then the disposition. So he doesn't talk about motive at all. He talks about
Over here.
You're doing this thing,
Over
and
here.
then knowing the thing that you're doing.
Over here it does. If you want to see the way it does, we go to 2.9
Okay.
and 6.4. I think there he does speak about it.
Okay.
Again, you're right. Listen, you're right. I shouldn't.
He said following the law. He said following the law is good to have
Following
the laws. That's the one you were reading. He was saying.
I mean, right now, meaning the Constitution. The Constitution.
So you're saying there that the country makes the rules for people to follow, and that turns them into good people.
Well, to try to make you a good citizen. That's the
The
Constitution.
motive there is to not go to jail or whatever else they were doing.
Meaning of their following, or yeah, but who said that is wrong? Who said that's a wrong motive when it comes to a politics?
But he clearly that was right. That worked for situations.
2 things. First of all, he doesn't think about going to jail. I'm not sure they even had it in Athens. But regardless of which, you're saying in today's case. But who said when it comes to following rules? Because rules, technically, many rules are sort of arbitrary, right? Who said that that's a wrong motive then?
Wasn't he saying that
But again,
how you get an ethical person? That the country makes the constitution, and that should produce people that are virtuous people through following the rules.
It trains you being virtuous, at least in a certain regards, right? I mean, there's many things which are more private and it's not governed by the rule, right? That's actually, I don't say the difference between the Torah and the Constitution, but that is sort of a difference. I don't want to get into that. But again, listen, you're right. I should make some virtues. Chatu says, let's continue. Yeah. Okay. So then obviously the question is, how do we actually know what the right thing is? And that is where Aristotle brings in something called phronēsis. Phronēsis is a Greek word, right? And the question is, should we read it inside? I'm not sure. Obviously, I'm not going to read the majority of the other places he speaks about it because we do not have the time. However, just to be clear, phronēsis is not a technical action. I mean, it's not a technical knowledge. It's not like something you could learn, like building a house. You open a book and you could read it. You could learn from there. Obviously, from it's not technical knowledge. Let's put it that way. It's not good. It's not also a scientific thing. It's not the Menuchah. We're talking about human action. Human action, by definition, could also be different. We decide to do things differently, right? It's not like 2 + 2, like something like a good logical knowledge. That's not what phronēsis is. Phronēsis is very important. It's not cleverness to know how to play the system to get to your end. That is something which is extremely important. I did not put that. Should have written down. Okay, whatever it is. And it's not an intuition either. That's something which is also very clear. It's not like a private intuition. It's a certain experience which you receive, which you get through actions and through teaching and through learning. That is, so we have the good action. We have the good result. The question is, how does the good action get to, which is the correct action to get to it? To know the good action is, that is what something called phronēsis. Now, I think I did have 6.7, in middle actually. I started in the middle because we do not know where's the visa zoo. It should be in It's the third page. It's the second page in the bottom. So we'll go to the third page, yeah. Because you see 6.7, but then there's a bunch of lines. Because I skipped most of it. I have to read it in here because it's not 100%. There's some mistakes there. 6.7 is a zoo. So where do I have it written down? And from what has been said, then it's clear intellectual accomplishments. I don't remember where I put it down from. No, I have the book itself. From what has been said, again, I'm not going to touch every single thing because it's really getting late, so we're holding nowhere near the end. All right. From what has been said then, it is clear that intellectual accomplishments is a combination of systematic knowledge and intelligence with the things that are the highest by nature as its objects. This is why people call Anaxagoras and Thales, these are the first philosophers, and people of that sort accomplished, but not wise. When they say, when they see them lacking a grasp of what is to their advantage. In other words, just knowing knowing what the thing is and not knowing how to actually do it practically is not considered is we're not going to call it accomplished. Is not a wise person, right? That knows how to actually use his knowledge to his advantage. And they say that people like that know things that are exceptional, wonderful, difficult, and even superhuman, but useless, because what they inquire into are not the goods that are human. Right? They weren't discussing the human thing. And it's worse than that the first philosophers are busy with, what's the most from the world, what is it, what are the atomic structure, not atomic, they weren't Stoics, but whatever it means to say is the essence, what they call the four elements. Well, the element. What is the main element? Which is the water, was it air, whatever it is, fire. It is wisdom that has to do with things. So what is wisdom? Wisdom is wisdom that has to do with things human and with things one can deliberate about. For this is what we say is most of all the function of the wise person, to deliberate well. And no one deliberates about things that are incapable of being otherwise, or about the sorts of things, right? No one deliberates 2 + 2 is 4, or maybe 6, or maybe 7. No, deliberate means the definition of things which could be otherwise, and that would say a wise person knows how to deliberate correctly and come out to the correct action that should be taken in the case, in the circumstance. That's what it means by a wise person, to deliberate well. And no one deliberates about things that are incapable of being otherwise, or about the sorts of things that do not lead to some end, right? Where this is a practicable good, right? So a practical good. And the person who is without qualification, the good deliberator, is the one whose calculations make him good at hitting upon what is best for a human being among practical goods. Nor is wisdom only concerned with universals. This is also very important. Nor is wisdom only concerned with universals. To be wise, one must also be familiar with the particular, since wisdom has to do with action, and the sphere of action is constituted by particulars. This is a big problem in general, right? Everything. Whenever you learn something, we're learning about, the Ramchal also says, for instance, right? The prutim is impossible to know, and the Hagdum Derech Hashem, the famous thing, right? The prutim is impossible to know. The klulim, so the only thing I can teach you is the klulim. All right, so the Menuchah. If the prat is part of the klal, in that case, you're technically teaching him the prutim. If the prat is not part of the klal, then what are you teaching, right? And that is actually, it's a big problem. The answer to this is precisely, let's not jump ahead. That is technically what we're calling wisdom. Nor is wisdom only concerned with universals. Wisdom, because the universal itself is not a concrete action, right? Because universals basically is telling you what things are in general, but it's not a case, right? To be wise, one must also be familiar with the particular. He has to understand how the particular connects with the universal and know what to do. Since wisdom has to do with action. And the sphere of action is by definition constituted by particulars, right? You don't deal with universals, we deal with concrete actions, which is a particular case, an instance. That is why sometimes people who lack universal knowledge are more effective in action than others who have it, right? It's something that holds especially of experienced people. Experienced people may not fully understand the general rule, the thing, but Lamasa, praktisch gerät, right? That's what we're saying. Practically, how do we deal with it? Can I tell you how I went to the university that studied the theory thing? No, but I know this from experience. I know this is how things happen, right? There's a difference between experience and knowing the universal, knowing the particulars. Which is why sometimes the people who actually who are experienced are better off than people that are knowledgeable. Suppose someone knew that light meats. Right, it's actually a famous example, very important. Suppose someone knew that light meats are easily digestible. Let's say chicken is easy to digest as opposed to meat, meaning dark meat, and so healthy. But not what sorts of meat are light. He won't make anyone healthy, right? And the person who knows what the meat from birds is light and healthy will do so more. right? But wisdom has to do with action. So we need to have both sorts of excellence. No, we need wisdom more. And here too will be that kind of archetype. Basically, is the mushal that he gives that there's a story from, I don't know if it's true or not, look at that Chaim Brisk, right? That somebody came to ask him a shale on I think it was a kidney, whatever it was, a bird, whatever, the try finished. So he took the thing and he had if it's a kidney, if this is the kidney, if this is the lung, this is what? Right, the concept is the same concept, right? In other words, knowing the theory and knowing the practical aspect of it is different, right? So in other words, you can know the concept general rule, but you don't know but you don't know the concepts. Right? So now we have something called the universal and the particular. You have the rules, the general rules. You have the general actions, but you don't. But the particular, that is knowledge. Wisdom is knowing how the particular goes under the universal, and if it's what exactly. Right? That's like the Shabbos.
The experience contradicts the knowledge.
So that is, I guess, in the more, it was like almost a scientific amount. The only thing that's really possible is by science, right? And I don't want to get into science in general, but again, if the theory, it has to be, but you do have to be a bit more specific. The theory, that's ungefähr from
in a certain way, but it's based on a belief that really is like. We did research. I mean, things happen. Like people for years believed a certain thing. The experience was there. Every person you would ask, go around and ask him.
But that's not. No, I understand.
You're based it on experience.
No. I understand, but it's not what Aristotle is saying. Aristotle is like mushalam. That's hexes. That's that's sorry, not that hexes. That's taxa. That's public. That's an old, not old wives' tale, but basically is
So what is it?
there's a word for it in English. It means say it. The mushal he gave, for instance, with the white meat, right? He's saying I know that white meat. That's again the mushal of Chaim or Dragacha, right? I know the white meat is healthy. I don't know what white meat is. Right? I lack the experience. Of course, experience has to be subsequent on the universal. Otherwise, you don't need the universal either, right? That's the whole point. Ramchal's saying here is, I can't teach you particular because they're too much. I'll teach you the universal. You'll have to go out and actually try to understand. There's a certain training which you have to undergo, which cannot be taught. That is the whole point of it. Is action. You can know what but to know exactly what the right action, the correct thing is, that I can't teach you, right? Let's go to Shabbos, right? Seminar 8, right? I wanted to go give a small and take the opportunity to go give a small recap seminar 8, but it's not going to happen now. We're only too late. But basically, is what we said objectively as a Shabbos is Menuchah. That is the end result of the thing. There's two aspects. There's Shabbos, meaning what the Shabbos is the end of creation, right? The quilting point that we have discussed over there, and then there is the concept of the person, the people. We came up with time, whatever it is. We also, right? That's what we. Shabbos is a social aspect and there's an objective aspect of it, right? So now, because I know the thing what the point of Shabbos is Menuchah, again, take it for granted, is that the Shabbos is Menuchah, right? Of course, I know Shabbos is Menuchah, that's universal, I know thing. I have no idea ultimately what Menuchah is considered Menuchah. Tell me, I know if I'm going to go to a tree, I'm going to cut off a fig, right? Did I do Menuchah? Did I exert myself? Did I rest? Yes, I did, right? I mean, I did not exert myself, right? I really didn't do it, big deal. But if I go and let's say I carried a bunch of dishes to the table, whatever it is, if it was heavy and if it was mitted, right? I exerted myself, so I didn't have Menuchah. In other words, knowing the klal, it does not teach you what is ultimately right or wrong. We have to know what counts a Menuchah, what we're going to constitute a Menuchah. And therefore, we can then apply it to the practice. Just because you know the objective good over here, the objective goal, Menuchah does not mean you know what counts as Menuchah or not. Right? Okay. So there's a certain experience which you get taught of how to understand the which klulim are correct, which klulim are not.
Which klulim was fruitum related to the klal.
Well, exactly, that's the point. But what I'm here is just because I know the name Menuchah does not mean I know what Menuchah means. Just because I know what so-and-so is does not mean I know what is subsumed under that aspect. That is what Phronēsis is. Now,
it's after experience, because you could argue he just doesn't know enough. If he read the whole Shulchan Aruch, now he knows what. So he needs to know properly.
Right, and we're going to get to the end. I'll give more concrete cases to see that. I mean that in the Shabbos we don't know that, but as a general thing here, in that case it wouldn't be any machlokes. By definition, Menuchah means we don't really know exactly which part is what. when what can, there's always the argument is what exactly is the correct prat under this klal. That is what arguments really are, right? The point of it here is the case contains many facts. We don't know what is the practical aspect, meaning what is the correct, what makes it the correct part subsumed under the case, right? So in other words, a wise person is trained to be able to discern what is the correct prutim, the correct practical aspects, which should be subsumed under this action and makes it the good, correct action. That is what a wise person is. And that ultimately cannot be written down be'etzem. We'll see soon. I mean, Stamos are again, because you can't give you every single practical case which comes by, right? I can't go think through every single aspect which is going to happen, right? Not that, but I have to know it gets subsumed under the law. In other words, I could give you the law, right? I think I'll make it simple like this. I give you the law. I have the Constitution. I know what the thing is. However, I have to know if this is considered part of this, what we consider this action or not. Is this, when we say so and so, did we mean this particular case or not? That is what a wise, discerning person is able to do.
How does one become that wise?
Through being taught and through experience and through practice. And that is why it's so difficult. If it was a simple, there is no real formula for it, right? So I definitely don't want to use that because later I want to clarify why this is not Torah Shabbat Peh. As I don't want to, because Masori already sounds like Torah Shabbat Peh. But we don't have to get. It's basically you're being taught through experience. That's what shimish is technically, right? What is shimish? I think shimish is a better word. Shimish.
You have that.
You have a look at everything, right?
In arts.
Right. You're being.
You can learn.
If it was possible to learn everything from a book, as Aristotle says, then you wouldn't need to have teachers.
But what I'm struggling a little bit, and this is just a question in general. We're talking about Aristotle. I can understand how to apply to religion, to Judaism, because we have a halachic system. So we know already that this is the right way. Now we go have to figure out the prutim. Am I really doing halacha? But when all of it is man-generated...
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Well, okay. I think I understand the question, really, and also just to say that...
One starting point here that you're telling me, you have the knowledge,
so,
now you can
so,
figure
so,
out, like, what...
No,
in his world, I'm talking about...
Shai. Two things. First of all, Aristotle's word itself, it's like because again, we're granting it for today's seminar that he's correct, it's not man-made in that sense. It's objectively correct in human, I don't call it human nature, the correct way, the correct thing. It is objectively correct. It's not man-made.
So don't kill, don't steal, those are the...
Those correct virtues is something which is he doesn't even use the word innate. I don't remember the exact word that he uses. It's not an intuition either. It is ultimately the correct thing. Human flourishing is objective. It's an objective fact. It's an objective thing, the concept of human flourishing. And that is what it means to be a virtuous human being, to do everything. To be a human being, ultimately the end goal, to be a virtuous human being means a person that is completely in line with, it's basically the definition of being a human is someone that does acts through virtues. It's a definitional thing. So yes, if you're doing it, yeah. So you want to be an animal, so you can be an animal, but you're not being a person. Definition of being a human is definitional. Same with being a tree, right? Remember we gave the thing, right? A tree, definition of a tree is not that to grow, if it didn't grow big, so what do you mean that it's growing? Well, no, but definition of a tree means to grow to its height as big as a king. That's what definition means, right? The definition of something is not external to it. That's the telos, right? The telos. It's intrinsic in the definition. So yes, the question here, I think you're sort of, because you're putting two things together, so who said that's right and wrong? Well, then again, what does right and wrong mean? Does right and wrong mean, so you're viewing that as a force of a external lawgiver making a right and wrong. It's not how Aristotle views right and wrong. For him, right and wrong is definitional. That means being a good tree means growing like a tree. Being a good human means doing what would be best flourishing for the human being. It's not an external lawgiver. That is a whole different moral theory. The Stoics had it. Technically any religion has it, right? So You get what I'm saying? It's two different things over here. It's right and wrong in the way you're using it is right or wrong from a moral lawgiver. That's not Aristotle. There is no such thing for Aristotle. Right and wrong is good and bad. In other words, you doing what is the depth of the. If you, it's easy to understand with a tree because you're kind of confused, right? Moral and that, right? So you say, how is it possible? This is a good tree or a bad tree? Is that correct? We speak like that. What do you mean? It's not. That's not action. Doesn't actually do. How's it possible for it to be a good tree or a bad tree? That means if it lives up to what it is potential to be, what is by definition supposed to be, that is a good tree. That is also on a human being for Aristotle. It is not an external lawgiver, I think. So you understand the moral right and wrong is you're sort of putting it together.
What the Rambam says by the Menuchah is that.
No. That's a separate thing. That's the same because there's two different categories. There's the concept of true and false, and the concept of tav, meaning of
But that
good.
also, in order to, step away, there's no, we're coming to it on by ourselves, but just by being human, we are already somehow understanding that these are the things we should or shouldn't do.
Because that is definition, but it's not what the Rambam necessarily saying over there, right?
No, I'm saying
If we didn't understand the concept of good and bad,
Shabbos and shake and turn it out, two different things.
right? So no, but we didn't have toivera before.
Because turn it out subjective. Shake is not.
Not necessarily subjective either, because one thing because it's subjective as it relates to true and false, but the point over here is more because there was no concept of tava.
Right. Okay.
And so yes, if you want to tie it into moral, then you can say. But I think I'm saying a slightly different point. But I don't think in a technical thing, yes, you could say is the same thing.
What it says is that the concept of a person is do me or whatever.
Yeah.
That
Flourishing.
Have flourishing happiness, and that comes from flourishing as a human being. And everything that brings to that.
Because but I think you're skipping the most important point because that is the definition of a human being. Therefore, that is so the moral imperative. What's making the action is not an external lawgiver. It's not that you ought to do the thing. It's right. It's not that you should do it because somebody's making you do anything. No, that is the definition. You don't want to do it. Okay, no, so don't do it. It's behind me then, right? So don't do it. It's not a right or wrong in the way that you're understanding it. That's a moral lawgiver, which is why I'm saying, so yes, a law, an external constitution, if it's a bad constitution, then yes, in truth, you really shouldn't be necessarily listening to it because it's going to form you wrong, and it's wrong because it's not what's going to make you a good human being. However, a good constitution makes you to a good human being, which is why you're going to be following it, not because it's an external lawgiver. Right? I think I should answer your question also, by the way.
The only thing is, again, I want you to maybe just recap. So basically, we said that there has to be a right mass in order for it to count as the first thing I said. What is the right mass? You're saying that I'm not totally clear. How do you get to the right mass? You're saying that's when you put the particulars together with the...
Two different questions. What and how? Two different questions. What is the right master and how do you get to the right master? Two different questions. What the right master is, doing an action, the right mode, the right amount of time, at the right time, to the right person, at the right place. That is what a good action is. How do I know it's the right action? That is experience. That is what phronēsis is, and it's a certain thing which has to be acquired and trained. It's not intuition. However, I don't think we can really get too much more into it, but that's something which is through shemesh. You train, which is why it's important to have more teachers who are moral, and they train you, teach you how something is. But the what and the how, two different questions. What correct action is, in other words, one thing is clear, right? We're not going to get how we know what the right action is. Again, that is a great question. That is the whole thing of ethics, right? That is the whole thing.
Aristotle was going to say this, and Allah was going to say something else, whatever. So
no, that's also you go back to the what. No. Well, yes. So you're saying halacha is ethics.
No, I'm not saying the Aristotle flourishing brings ethics.
According to the only Pashtus, again, I'm not saying true. About Pashtus, if we read the Rambam, the only thing he argues on the Aristotle is on two aspects: anger and gava. Everything else, midas-wise, he seems to be saying everything Aristotle said. And I'm not saying whether I agree with it or not. So that means ultimately there's no argument, right?
Ultimately,
But again, I don't want to get into that. I definitely don't want to get into that. Right now, these are separate questions which we haven't dealt with. We're going to get too much derailed as is sort of over time. The point of it here is that the what in the Gaia today is the what. An action, habituation happens in the space between doing an action and becoming a person who is, his disposition is to keep on doing that action. What has to be done is that the action has to be the correct, virtuous action. What is an action, a virtuous action? That is what's on the correct, right, whatever thing. In other words, the point of it here is it's not a neutral thing. You do an action, it gets tzedakah, you gave money, then therefore you automatically are trained to give money. No, you're trained to give the action that it was, not motive. We're not talking about motive here. If you gave to the wrong person at the wrong time, that means you're being trained now to give to the wrong person at the wrong time. We're going to get the more Nagaya to the question soon. I understand I didn't really say that much now, whatever. We'll get to that soon. Point of it here is again, so how there's not a sixth sense, not a fifth shechanurich, that's a separate thing, we'll get to it in a minute. The point of it here is there's a certain wisdom, you have to be a wise person that knows how to know what is an important part of every action which constitutes and makes it, that goes under the general thing of the action you should do. Not every action, you could be doing a wrong action easily, and then you train the wrong action. There's a certain faculty called Thesis, the thing, even if you know the general rule, it becomes lamas of the poil, practically, you know the universal, you could be let's go to the doctor as a simple case, right? You know that white meat is healthy, but you don't know what white meat is, doesn't help you much. You have to know the practical aspect of white. So when it comes to morals, it's the same thing. You can know the certain actions which thing, but you have to know exactly which actions constitute the correct actions. You can know the good midas, we can know the good midas of being a person that does benachas, whatever thing. But you have to know what makes a person that, not how the person becomes. Meaning, what exactly is the action? How I know the action is a separate question again. But that this faculty is called right. That's what we're doing. Now we're going to skip over here. I don't have time for this. He calls it an eternal eye, which could see. It's kind of it could see through all the veils and everything, and it could tell you what the correct action is. He calls it an eternal eye. That's how Aristotle calls it, if you want. And also, most of the discussion is really in 6. We're skipping it on the time. Now there's a different aspect. There's a different problem over here is that we have the law, and you have something called Epieikeia, which is translated different things. We're going to call it just. Do we have the time to read it? It's actually also relatively easy. I'm not going to skip this for sure. Where is it? Where's the Zoom? 510. Where's 510? Oh, it's long. All right, I'm going to read it very quick. And I'm not going to touch everything because really it's going to the next thing to discuss is the reasonableness and the reasonable. How reasonableness relates to justice and the reasonable to the just. If one looks into the question, they give the appearance neither of being unqualifiable the same nor being different of kind. Basically, he's asking the question over here is something can be just and reasonable. Are they the same thing or not? Saying somebody doing a just action and he's being in a reasonable and he's doing something reasonably. Are they the same thing or not? So Menuchah, if they're the same thing, if they're not the same thing, that means you can have a person that's just but he's not being reasonable, or a person that's reasonable and not just. If they are the same thing, why in the world do we have 2 words for it, right? So either what is just is not good. I'm skipping because I just said it. I paraphrased it. These then are the considerations. I'm going to the first word on that line is these. These then are the considerations that make reasonableness problematic. Yet in a way they're all correct, and there is no inconsistency between them. For the reasonable is better than what is just in one sense of just, but is nevertheless just. Being reasonable means being completely just. Whereas a person being just means only just is not being reasonable. Sounds paradoxical, and I'm going to explain a bit more. Let's read a little more of this. It is not better than the just as constituting a different kind. The same thing in that case is just and reasonable. While both are good, the reasonable is superior. And while both are good, the reasonable is superior. What creates a problem is that while the reasonable is just, it is not just according to law. Reasonable is just, it is not necessarily just according to law. Being reasonable is better than just. However, it is not necessarily going according to law. So how is that better if it's not going according to the law? Because rather being reasonable is a rectification of the legally just. The cause of this is that all law is universal. Every single law is given to universal, and yet there are some things about which it is not possible to make correct universal pronouncements. Right? Because every law, by definition, is going through the universal aspects, not the particulars. And in that case, when we have particulars, okay, I think so. When the sorts of cases in which it necessarily pronounces universally, but cannot do so and achieve correctness, law chooses what holds for the most part, in full knowledge of the error it is making. Nor is it for this reason any less correct. For the error is not in the law or in the lawgiver, but is in the nature of the case. We can only speak about universals, and therefore I leave out certain cases which will be an osnam, and I don't write about it. So a person who is plain just, okay, I'll say the rest, but I'll paraphrase because it can take too long. So a person that is just, everything, this as I state and finish. It goes everything. It goes to the law. This is what it says and finished. A person that is reasonable understands when the law was not meant to be applied specifically to this case. Now, it does not mean reasonable is not mercy. That's a very, very different thing. Reasonable, if we want to use the Torah language, is the famous medrash, right? That Hashem went to the Torah and says, "What's the lushing?" Right? It said that it should be misa, right? Should be killed. Why? That is the law. The law is kach v'kach. The mushal Aristotle gives is when there's a certain an island called Lisbos, which when they measured rocks are, we take a ruler, a stiff ruler, you're not going to be measuring the rocks accurately. Why? Because it is it changes, it's not straight. So what they do is they had a ruler made out of lead, whatever the mitzvah is, and it conformed with the rocks. Now it's not shas. A person saying no, measure means you measure a tape measure. Yeah, that's if you go strictly with the law. That is called being a just person. A reasonable person understands when the law is intended for this to happen. Mercy is going above and beyond the law. Mercy saying here is I'm being maver amadoisel, I'm going above and beyond, and I'm not doing what the law says. Being just means going a stickler, exactly. Being reasonable means having a fifth shechanurich, knowing when the law was not some. Why? Because the definition, the way the way the law is given, and it could be maybe the shechanurich, but I would say law, when not Torah Shabbat, we'll get in a second, is given universal. Particulars may have changed. So we have two things over here which Aristotle is saying. We have the action. We know just actions. But there's no such thing as just doing an action. You have to understand through wisdom, practically, which action, what is the important point, what is the important aspect. Ich weiß, Shabbos means Menuchah. Does not tell you what Menuchah means. So you have to understand and take out which are the salient features of every single point, every single action, and that is what goes under the definition of the act of Menuchah, or any single law. Now, sometimes there's also a thing called that that we go above, that the law was not meant to be so to be such a at this prat, because the law was given in universal, and sometimes we have to go out. Now, this is not to be mixed up with Torah Shabbat Peh. Why? Because Torah Shabbat Peh, we're going to get to it maybe 7 or 12, whatever it is. The point of it here is that Torah Shabbat Peh is a very different thing. Torah Shabbat Peh is not a band-aid on the Torah Shabbat Ksav. In other words, I said Torah Shabbat, easy mistake to make over here. Torah Shabbat Ksav is the law, the Constitution. Now, sometimes, certain cases, which is a osnam, and we don't think, so yeah, Torah Shabbat Peh, the Chazal, they give like a band-aid on Torah Shabbat. That's not what Torah Shabbat Peh is at all. Torah Shabbat Peh is a whole different bria, which really do not even whatever. So we're going to leave it, but it's not Torah Shabbat Peh. Point over here is right now. So we have two aspects. We have the law. We have the concept of doing objective. We have objective good actions, good things, right? And then we have the concept of what? Wisdom and reasonableness, which tells you how to try. Which these are faculties which are trained, and you learn how to actually apply the laws to particular actions. Now, the question over here is, why can't we make a general action, a general rule that tells you when to follow the rule? For that, we're going to go through to Immanuel Kant. It's actually relatively easy, surprisingly enough, this part. I'm going to read it very quick. So it's the last one you have. It's on page 4. So just to say, okay, never. Fragt the Immanuel Kant as if the understanding in general is explained as a faculty of rules, understanding means you have the faculty of rules, whatever, then the power of judgment is the faculty of subsuming on the rules, right? Judgment is telling you how actions subsume under the rules. Of determining whether something stands under a given rule or not. General logic contains no precepts at all for the power of judgment, and moreover cannot contain them. So Kant is coming to ask us some question. Why can't I make a rule which will tell me when this particular action goes on this rule? I'll make a rule for the rule. You have a rule, and this will tell you that so-and-so, in other words, that's the tzedukah. I'll have a rule that the halacha is you give to a appropriate recipient, and then I'll tell you a rule of here is how to identify who is appropriate or not. So, therefore, I can have a rule for every single case. I can know exactly what to do. Look at general logic, contains no precepts at all for the power of judgment, and moreover, cannot contain them. For since it abstracts from all contents what is logic? Logic is an abstraction of concepts. For since it abstracts from all contents of cognition, right, a rule, a generality, nothing remains of it but the business of analytically dividing the mere form of cognition into concept, judgments, and inferences, and thereby achieving formal rules for all use of the understanding. Something tells me that's going to take a bit longer than I thought. No, Kant is very interesting. He has his language and which he uses. So this is, the concept of cognition, this is what the whole book is really about. But I just have to explain every single word. It's going to take, let's just say, whatever. Now, if we wanted to show general, did I skip? General inference. Basically, if you think about it, what is logic? What is the concept of? It's to abstract from concrete cases to the general rule, right? So a rule, by definition, a logic, by definition, telling you a logical form, a logical concept, is telling you not a particular concrete case, is basically telling you a general thing, not concrete. Examples are to take logical rules and try to bring it into concrete cases. Right? So now, if we wanted to show generally how one ought to subsume under these rules, so if we wanted to show in general how should somebody go under these rules, right? The concept of the judgment, I distinguish whether something stands under them or not. This cannot happen except once again through a rule. The only way to make a rule then, because a rule is supposed to be general, so the only way, I need to have the rule, you give tzedukah to the correct person. Now, the appropriate recipient. The rule, I'll tell you a rule how to identify if this person is the correct recipient. And I'll tell you another rule of how to know if this recipient is under the rule, the second rule, which is under the first rule. In other words, it's impossible. You cannot make a rule, because a rule by definition is an abstract concept form. It's not a particular case, right? The minute you get to a particular case, that is not an abstract rule, that is a judgment. Does this particular case go under the rule? Therefore, we cannot have, I'm just going to skip a slide about that. Therefore, we cannot have a rule to tell me a rule. Why? Because again, a rule is telling you is, now give tzedukah to the right person. And I'll tell you in Shechapir tells exactly how do we tell this is the correct recipient or not. Great. Now, I have a concrete case. How do I know if this person is? I'm going to make a third rule. About what? About this particular case? That's not a rule then, right? That is a concrete object, concrete thing. So that is what judgment means. Judgment means to understand if a particular case goes under a rule. But you cannot make a rule to tell me if this rule goes on that rule to that, because then you're just going to have a infinite regress. Now, Kant himself has a whole different understanding of judgment itself. So we're not going to get into this, not in the guide to this week for sure not. But what is in the guide, the point of view here is that we have two aspects. Point of view here is now. Let's make a quick sikkim, because there's been quite a lot of information over here. The sikkim over here is like we have the concept of doing of doing things, right? We have. It's almost. All right, we're give another 5 minutes to be finished. So we have the concept of doing actions, concept of doing a good act. We have something is a good action, doing something good, right? Now this is the concept, doing something good. Now, the question over here is, how do I know that my particular action, that's a universal concept, universal concept of doing a good action, giving tzedukah, let's say. How do I know if this particular action is the correct action, is really a good action, that's subsumed under that rule? Now, we can't have a rule telling me every single rule, impossible, so I need to have a judgment to know what's under that rule. It's no magical thing that something goes under that, right? Meaning that's what Kant teaches us. Aristotle has two wisdom that we know particular cases goes under the general rule of the action. So I'm using let's use the correct words over here. So we have the universal concept, right? Now we have a particular action. And you know this particular action goes under that universal action, what we call the good action. Right? So now we have phronēsis, you have judgment, you have multiple different tools of how we can, through training, know if this action, particular action, is under the universal good action. However, there is no such thing as a action which automatically is a necessarily good action. It has to be discerned. A person has to be able to taught, has to learn how to discern an action, each particular action, if it's subsumed under that universal good action. Whether through judgment, the faculty of judgment, whether through phronēsis, whether it is through being a Epieikeia, the judgment, not judgment, the last thing from Aristotle, no? Basically, the fifth reasonableness, right? These are tools we have in every single action. Now, I was going to say, I think it was Shabbos, but I don't know. I think at this point, I'm just going to skip it. I'm going to bring the Torah. I'll say Mamash begets in minutes because it's a little thing. It's a basic thing, right? You have the Mishnah, the Shabbos, Dafit Ches, right? The concept over here is that you have, if you're allowed to open up a irrigation channel, 8 of Shabbos, if it goes in Shabbos, even though the Menuchah is going to happen in Shabbos. However, you're not allowed to go on put into a water mill, 8 of Shabbos and that, right? Nemura, why not? Now, these are two cases exactly the same, right? Because they open on 8 of Shabbos, done before Shabbos. It goes in Shabbos. You're not doing anything new in Shabbos. Right? It's only in Grumme. So you have a Shvilei, it's because it makes public noise, or because she says Kailim, right? Now, in other words, we have the exact same, the physical aspects, as Menuchah-wise, it seems to be the same. So now the question over here is two different reasons over here. Either because they say it's a Shmiras Kol, or we say it is because of what? Because it is Shvisas Kailim. Nafkamina is B'Shamai or B'Sil. Allah is being Nafkamina. What I'm trying to bring over here, you have Mechukas of Yosef with the rest here. The point over here, what I'm trying to bring out with this over here is that there is no such, from seeing a physical thing, we still have to take out what is the classifying case. Is it Usaf because of Shvisas Kailim? Or is it Uska Shmiras Koil? Even if it is the same, in other words, what is the difference between the irrigation channel? Which aspect is the difference? Shmiras Koil or Shvisas Kailim? Even if two things could look the same, there still is a difference. That is where where judgment comes in. Actions, particular actions, under the general rule, which goes under which. Now, let's...
From the prat to the klal. There you know the prat.
No, that's it. So you learn the klal.
From the prat.
No, you learn the klal. And we then have to understand the prat does it go into the klal, which is the defining feature of the klal, which subsumes the prat underneath it.
I thought the prat is no opening a water mill before Shabbos. That's like a very actionable, specific halacha.
Yeah, but I'm irrigation channel is allowed to be open before Shabbos, right?
Now we're trying to figure out.
No, but that is the Bryce is telling me the one thing that one's not allowed,
those
right?
Are two proper, no? Those are two details. Those are
Meaning, right. Meaning,
you're going backwards.
Yeah.
I can't ignore something.
Yeah.
That's a more general.
No, you're right. Those are two klulim which I have in the Bryce. Now Shechanurich. No, you're correct. But now, right, you're right. The two cases, but they're giving the universal rule, right? For also Shechanurich. In Shechanurich, and what the thing is, I'm learning. Though I got that is the Gemara is always considered the universal rule, right? That's universal. Now I have to find out which prat goes under the klal. In the guy look, so you have the Shechanurich paskins that that is allowed because he holds that's a Shvisas Kaim. The Musa the Chachili Machmer as well because it is Shvisas Kaim because a Shmu is called Chachili, right? So that's exactly it. The point over here is not the klal. I mean, you're correct; those are two pruta, but every single. But as far as we're concerned, for argument's sake, it is a klal for us because we're taking a halukha from it for a prat. You're correct. They also have the same thing with the shvisas. Is a poil out of work? Is it considered avdechu and mesechu? Again, we don't have time for all these prutim, whatever it is. We have to skip it. Now let's get back to the shala, the question over here, right? So we have granted that the objective end is a good thing that came out. We say it's even called tzedakah. We say it's even called we forget about motive. That does not necessarily mean that just because he gave money, it was a good act. It could be he gave more than he was able to. He should have been given to other people, meaning he has a kroivim first. It could be that it was the wrong. Another point of view is that many different every single action has many different prutim. So now again, if ultimately he gave according to his means, did not neglect anybody else. Exactly. Well, then yes. I mean, he did a good action. So that is precisely what habituation is. But if he did not do the right thing, then all he did was he habituated now a wrong action. So in other words, there's no such thing as you're saying he gave out money to a good cause. Because he gave to a good cause, objectively, the end result was a good cause, does not mean the action was a good action. If the action is a good action, well, that we have to know each circumstance each case by itself. But it could be that again, if he neglected, he is supposed to get. If he has a kuda, he comes first. If he does not, he gave a lot more than he was supposed to. I give you a bunch of different halachas. Whatever. That means the action was wrong, even if the good end result is. Even though he trained himself to take out money. But again, there's no such thing as neutral. He could train himself to build a bad building. Does that mean that he's becoming now a good builder? Of course not. The action itself, the end result itself, does not tell me the action was a good action. And therefore, even though he gave and the miser didn't give, it could be the miser is even better because he didn't train himself to give to wrong causes, for bad reasons, for bad purposes.
So let me ask you a question. The next week, he is going to give for the right reason. The other guy is not going to get. In other words,
Hold on.
Maybe in this particular case, he should have done something else because he really has a put of machasan that should have been covered. So he neglected that. But the fact that he can give, tomorrow we will find a good reason to give. He will be the one that's still giving, and the other guy is not.
Is he giving because he knows that that this is the correct action at the right time, at the right place?
Right now, it happens to be. In other words,
So,
he knows how to give.
Hold on. Let me ask you a question.
He should have given to his cousin that's making chasana, but he did. But
next week, which he doesn't have a cousin giving chasana, so therefore he doesn't have that reason. He's going to go again and give to somebody else. So does that mean he was habituated to give to good things, or his time it comes? So Kim knows that he's giving now for the correct reason. I mean, he doesn't have that external thing we should have given it.
He's building bad. He's training himself to give. So you can say, first of all, like this, even here, he gave for a good cause. Now you'll say, if you really think about it, he should have given something else. But the reason why he didn't is because the other reasons why he gave here, but he's a giver. So next week when his cousin is going to make chas and he doesn't have now a shield to build, he's going to give him. But the guy that doesn't give. So in other words,
right. Hold on. So let's stop for a second. So he's saying over here is that the end result ends up being a good end result. Saying he always ends up having a good result.
He's saying that next time he has a poor person at home, and he's going to give him money with the right. It's going to be the right action for the right reason, and everything it's going to work because now he trained himself to give.
Hold on. If we have the exact same case again, I said next to the exact same case goes again.
He would probably do the same thing.
So that means he was not habituated in the correct way of giving, right?
But when contrasting the person that gave, the person that didn't give.
So that the only difference with that over here is there we have the end result. Ultimately, this person that was giving, this givee that started giving money, that is giving money, has habituated himself to give for the wrong, to do the wrong action. The problem, I think, it seems the problem here is that we're focusing the whole time is on the end result.
The end, it's not.
He's
not even habituating himself to the shmo.
No, I don't want to get into lishma. I don't want to. You could, but I don't want to get into this. That mixes the motive.
This guy is already giving. The first time he didn't habituate to give because he gave the first time also. So to giving, he doesn't have to habituate himself. He's giving, right?
So every giving brings
an end. No, but that's the point. Every giving. So again, that's again. This person, he gave whatever the reason he gave wrong, right? He gave wrong. It means it was a wrong action. If he gave wrong, that means it was a wrong action, right?
Yeah.
He didn't give correctly. It means it was done wrong, right? He gave wrongly.
He gave for a good cause, but he should have done maybe something else.
Hold on again. Giving to a good cause means the end result, meaning there was an objective good thing that happened here. But that's the saying. Good cause and good person, two different things.
It's half because it's better to give to the wrong cause than to give to no cause.
So did he do the right thing?
He did a little bit the right thing. I mean, compared to the guy who did nothing, he did more the right thing.
So if a person kills somebody halfway, he did only a little kill.
The guy
Only did a little bit of the right
the
thing.
person who's not supposed to give money to in halal is better than the guy that money to the shul.
It's better for which reason? Because now this person has money, because now the Shia will build something. I agree. I agree.
Give the shul money except for the fact that you have a car that's making a car.
So again, Menuchah, if you're saying that the concept, the mushal I'm giving does not make minashich, you're allowed to give. There's only the list of the 10 thing that comes first is only. I think you should do like that, but if you do that, it's so good. But again, so that's still a good action, right?
Well,
The minute
the question is, he is getting habituated to good because he is doing good even now.
But if the action is wrong, then he's being habituated to the wrong action, correct?
Yes, but the action is not. It's somewhere between right and wrong because it's better than some things and worse than other things.
It's better than not giving.
It's better than that.
For whom? For the person giving or for the person receiving?
Both. In short, it's better to give money to the person that's 10th on the list than to not give money at all. Everyone would agree.
Because the end result is the person needs money has money, but as the person giving it, he is giving wrong.
I would think it's the mitzvah is not minimum. You did the mitzvah in the best way.
So in that case, in that case, that is not a problem. But let's say he's giving away more money than he can, and right now there has no money to pay it. So then it's a bad action, right? So see, in other words, the reason you're not even arguing on this whole thing, you're saying that here is that the mushal I gave, you don't like the mushal, no problem. No. I get it. Let me give a different example. Let me give you a different example. The example over here is now he only has in his bank account $50,000 and he's giving all $50,000 to the shul. And right now, because of that, he is not going to be able to clothe his children, to be able to feed his children, etc., etc. He didn't have to go collecting. Was this a good action?
Oh, that's a bad.
But did a good thing come out of it?
Yeah.
Objectively, yeah, the shul has no money, right? So in other words, but right now, he learned to give, but he learned to give tzedakah. Yes, he trained himself to give the wrong way. And that is a point. I am not arguing, in other words, I am not saying in your case, hold on, one second. I want to clarify one thing. I'm not even saying in your case, it was a bad thing. Could be, that's a question of motive, we're not discussing. I'm saying to say a blanket statement that you're teaching yourself to give, that doesn't mean anything. There's no neutral giving. You can teach yourself to give wrongly. Going back to seminar 7, our critique against the lecture is precisely this. There is no such thing as a masa mitzvah, a munashich. If he is doing a mitzvah, well then obviously thank you. Of course you're going to habituate yourself. I mean, that's a means, that's doing a mitzvah correctly. If you're not doing it correctly, well then you're habituating yourself to do it wrong. In other words, there's no such thing as a neutral, kavun is a din in the ma'isa, din in the mitzvah. There is no such thing. You have to know is this a good action or a bad action.
According to you, the only Shvilei that works is only when it's koiv himself.
Shvilei lishma is motive. We haven't discussed that.
Motive, okay.
The question, and now we're talking about action particularly. Point of view is the same way.
I think he wants to get to that.
We'll get to. But right now, yeah, we'll get to. But right now, the only thing, right. The only thing I wanted to bring out over here is that even after Wittgenstein, we still have the thing called action, and there is no such thing as a neutral action. I mean, the action is either good or bad. If you're doing a bad action,
it's better to learn how to build the wrong way. Let's say I build the wrong way for 10 years.
I personally would argue. Which one? No, it's not. It's a lot hard. It's a lot harder. Shabeshta, keeping the all. If you learn the wrong way.
Learn the wrong way. People who learn things the wrong way, it's a very difficult thing to do.
Exactly. Now, so to reply to your question, I'm not arguing in your particular example, but as a general rule, I don't think we can say that. Because somebody understands, someone who has $50,000 in the bank account, and he gives all that $50,000 to the Besmedish, he definitely trained himself to do the wrong thing. So giving, even though objective good happened, but therefore, right, be motive. It could be he did a Shem Shemayim. It could be a Shem Shemayim. He thought that he was supposed to be doing it. Well, he thought wrong, and that's precisely what he's supposed to be. Precisely this reason. Because you teach yourself the wrong things. You're habituating yourself wrongly. There's no such thing as, even though he taught himself to give money, he could easily teach himself to do wrong. If he did in this particular case, well, I don't know this person. Like, I know, that's the thing.